Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Healed and Chilled. And today we have yet another awesome and amazing, wonderful special guest. And you guys know how I like to do it here. I like for the guest to have control of the narrative. So, if you would, in your own words, from your own point of view, can you please introduce yourself and we'll dive right into the interview?
Gladly, gladly. So happy to be here. My name is John. I will say this one time, John Holdsclaw IV. I am President and CEO of Rochdale Capital, which is a CDFI based in Arlington, Virginia, and I'm also the Chief Policy Officer at the National Cooperative Bank, which means that I have two jobs. I'm dual titled, and I don't have a life apparently. But those are two two jobs that keep me pretty busy on a daily basis.
Yeah, I could imagine even one being a full day. So two is like double the fun, double the work, and double the learning as well, I'd imagine. So
Definitely.
how did you get into these spaces? Like, did you always want to go this route, or was it something you kind of learned about and fell into later on in life?
Uh, it's one of these things. I went to college and got a political science degree. I always loved civics and history, and so I thought that I would spend the majority of my career in government relations, which is a better word than lobbying. I don't like to say lobbying all the time. So I started my career in that, and then I'm a proud Head Start child as well. So I
Mm.
spent 3.5 years working for the National Head Start Association. That was great. Where I really cut my teeth in the lobbying world, but also it was great to give something back to the program that gave so much to my family and me. And then I
Mm.
left from there and I went over to a community development financial institution that was then called NCB Development Corporation, which is now called Capital Impact Partners, and really became a community economic development nerd. Just really having a better understanding about how community development and finance impacts communities.
Mm.
It was really how I kind of fell into it. I've always considered myself to be a mission-driven person. And so that combined with the community economic development piece of it is really what intrigued me the most.
Absolutely. So was and you mentioned like you wanted to give back and things. Is giving back important to you because that's like you know what it's like to be on the other side of it and you want to help the next generation? Or is it just a part of who you are and you can't really see a space without giving back and being part of the community in some way?
I think it's twofold. I think it's, being where I'm from. I grew up in a really small town in western part of North Carolina called Statesville, North Carolina, about
Mm.
35 miles north of Charlotte. And, that was one part of it, knowing, how I came up, my humble beginnings, and wanting to be able to help others. And then I think, too, from my parents, my mom and dad. My dad worked for a community action agency. He also worked at the Statesville Housing Authority and I always just wanted to help people. And I think my mom was the same way. She might not have always did it in a public fashion, but
Mm.
she was always giving and helping others. And I think that's really where it comes from and why it just comes so naturally to me, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is it like being like the president of an organization? Because we can, on the outside, you can just guess, oh, I bet you do
Right,
this, or I bet you do that. But
right.
what is that actually like? And how does it like all the different things that you can tell us?
Wow, that's a great question. I think for me, and I've only been a CEO for 4 years, going on 5 years. And I tell you what, I tell people all the time, you can manage three people and a fractional CFO like me, or you can have 300 people, or you can have 5,000 people. It's really a lonely space. It really
Mm.
is. And sometimes it's just you and your thoughts. Sometimes it's just you. I tell people this, admittedly, some mornings you get up and they're harder than others,
Mm.
when you're thinking about your day or things that you're going through. And then you think about members of the team who have mortgages, and you think about members of the
Mm.
team that have children in college and children in early care and education and things like that. And that's the motivation that gets you up. I think what a lot of people, don't understand is that take for granted is that you make so many decisions in a day. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're large, and whatnot. And so I still feel strongly that I'm evolving as a
Mm,
chief executive officer. And I think the day that we stop doing that as leaders, I think it's going to be a sad day. I do know one of the things that I take great pride in is being, I like inclusive leadership. I think that's very
mm-hmm,
important. And then secondly, I think as an effective leader, many years ago there was a global CEO survey that went out. A global CEO survey that went out that basically said, what is the number one attribute that most the most CEOs need to have?
mm-hmm,
People always say intelligence and delegation and all that kind of stuff. It's not. It's really intellectual flexibility. And so it's the
mm,
ability to be able to go down one path, see that it may be different, and then make a turn, or make an adjustment. And so I'm really, as I get older, I'm embracing this evolution as a CEO and a leader. And I think that's vitally important for anyone. So it's a day full of decisions, a day full of grinding just as hard as anyone else on your team, but also knowing that you're the standard bearer and the visionary that's
mm,
got to get folks behind you to chase, to jump, go into that foxhole or run up that hill and
mm-hmm.
whatnot. So it's vitally important for CEOs to be aware of that, and it's one of the things that I'm continuously learning. I'll say that to you.
Fair enough. And I appreciate your honesty in that. And the first thing that you said that a lot of people also say in your position and similar positions is that it is lonely, but another, from someone who doesn't understand why, like, can you explain why is it lonely at the top? Like it's always like certain pictures are painted in glitter. So everybody wants to be the boss. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur or the CEO or the
Hmm.
president or a corporate executive. Everybody wants the
Hmm.
corner office or, all these things. Everybody wants that, but few people really understand like what that actually
Right.
means. So can you break it down? Why is it lonely in those spaces?
Well, I think, for a lot, I mean, just to take it back just a second, I created the organization. So
Mm,
90% of what it's about, scary or not, came out of my brain. And so having a
mm-hmm,
better understanding about the intentionality of the organization, everything else, I mean, that's really a large part of me as an individual. But I think what it all boils down to is, management. And so I have a great team that supports me in the organization, but I'm managed by a 7-person board. And
mm-hmm,
so I have to make sure that I work with them and vice versa. And then it's the same way that I work with the team. And I think because you're that leader, I found out very early in my tenure as a CEO is that if I come to the meeting in a bad mood or have a
mm,
bad attitude, it's going to be a bad meeting. And
mm,
so by setting that tone, I have to always be mindful of my executive presence internally and
mm,
externally as I'm representing the organization. And so I think that the management of emotional intelligence and emotional EQ and all those kind of things. Any leader who doesn't continue to sharpen their saw
mm,
is not doing any good for the organization, for their teammates. I don't like to say my team or my this or my that. I like to say
right.
my teammates because I see myself just like one of them, but at the same
Mm,
time, knowing that, I remember in one meeting, somebody said to me, well, we're waiting on you to make the decision. And it's
mm,
almost like, everything comes rushing at you at one time because you do realize that you are the one that's going to make the ultimate decision and whatnot. And that's number one. And then number two, I'm a big believer in the buck stops here. So if a member of the team um something happens, it's my responsibility. It's not their responsibility.
mm,
I'm not about throwing people under the bus because I also have to serve as a buffer to the board and to them. And so,
mm.
those are the components of inclusive leadership and leading by example that I think are very important. It's just different. It's different.
Yeah.
And I think the more that you understand that and the more that you want to be better
Mhm.
at your job as a chief executive or anything in the C-suite, the better outcomes you're going to get.
Absolutely. And well stated. And so that brings me to another question
Hmm.
is, um, how did you learn how to balance with employees? Because there are some you can be like, you have to be professional and then friendly and accommodating, but also have boundaries and set up different things so that they're like people understand certain things need to get done and things. So how are you
Hmm.
able, how long did it take you to establish that that balance, find it, and then how are you able to create it?
Well, first of all, you're assuming that I found it.
Oh, fair
You're,
enough.
you're assuming that I've found it because I have not found it yet. Number one, number two, I probably need to do a better job of practicing what I preach. Look, I'll say the foundational piece for me is, and I always preach this to my teammates. I preach it to friends. I preach it to my 35-year-old niece.
Oh.
At the end of the day, don't ever let anybody question your grind, right?
Mm,
I kind of come into work every day with this attitude that no one's going to outwork me, right? And so that's where the foundation starts. And so I think by leading that way or modeling that way, other teammates see that. I'm not a micromanager, right? I'm
mm,
a big believer in if you were hired to do a job, do the job. If something comes up and you
mm,
need my help or you need a decision or it needs to be escalated, I'm there for you. But at the same time, well, we pay people to do their job. And I think that I'm surrounded by such an incredible team of individuals who understand that. And I found that in the organization, the more I leave them alone, the better work that they do. And so I have to sometimes make sure that I stay out of the weeds so that they can
mm,
get their jobs done, as well as check in with them, challenge them. One of my favorite questions to ask, and we had a team meeting today, and I ask everybody this, what are you struggling with right now? What are you
mm,
struggling with? And then I'll be the first to say what I'm struggling with, right? I think we haven't created these vulnerable spaces for people to be able to answer those kind of questions, right? Because it's seen as weakness or it's seen as you
mm,
not being able to handle something, but that really comes from a sincere place for me. I want to know what you're struggling with. And if you're struggling with
mm,
something, how can I help? And then lastly, I would say, I'm one of these folks who on Friday, I tell everybody, have a great weekend. We'll be back in the fight on Monday. And,
mm,
you can call that rah-rah, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But I just feel like it's important to be that motivator for the
mm,
team and approachable and, vulnerable and letting people know, man, this has been a tough week, but we got through it. We did this the Rochdale way and let's be back at it next week, that kind of thing. I think it sets a good precedent going into the weekend. And I almost want to test it sometime and not do it and see if they pick up on it. Like, John didn't send anything out today
mm.
saying we'll be back in the fight on Monday, kind of a deal, but I haven't done it yet. So,
Fair enough. Fair enough. Alrighty. So you also mentioned that learning, and I'm a big, big supporter of continuous learning because
hmm
the what I started to learn when I was younger, I always thought there's at some point where you can't know. I mean, I always thought that at some point you know not everything, but
hmm
you know like most things. And as I
yeah.
keep growing, I like to say season because we get better like
hmm
fine
That's
wine.
it. That's
So
it.
the more seasoned I become, the more I realize like, man, I might know like a drop in the bucket compared to this
hmm
ocean of knowledge. And
hmm
sometimes you don't know really what you don't know.
Right.
So what topics do you think, especially someone who's earlier on in their entrepreneurial journey or even in their
hmm
C-suite level journey, what are
hmm
some topics that outside the obvious, like leaderships and communication, some skills that people should be diving into so they can be a good, well-rounded leader?
Right. I'll say this. I am a big believer in intellectual curiosity. I'm one of those people who always likes to learn. My old boss who hired me into this movement in 2001 told me one time, and I didn't know if it was an insult or it was a compliment. When she told me one time, she goes, you really have a beginner's mind. And I didn't know what
Mm,
that meant. And then I came to find out that it's someone who, that anytime they approach anything from a learning standpoint, even if it's something that they've known or learned in the past, they always approach it as if they're learning it at the same time. And that's
mm,
something that I've been able to see, that I do a lot over the years, and I think for somebody in my position, um, you know, it comes in several different buckets. I mean, obviously, we do community development finance, and so I'm always interested in learning about new products or new programs and the people are doing, or new forms of community economic development. And so I tell people now, because of the schedule that I have, and time management is always something that I struggle with, is that I'll read a white paper. Now, I may not be able to read the book, but I'll read the white paper. Or if I see a book that I like, because I am a podcast nerd, I'll listen to a podcast with the author to kind of get the
right.
general overview of what the book is about, instead of reading it. The other component for me is I'm a big advocate for executive coaching. I think,
Mm,
and I've been something that I've been lucky to do in my career over the last 5 to 6 years, is to have executive coaches. Because again, I want to get better
right.
at my craft. And then last but not least, I'm really fascinated by emotional intelligence. I'm really fascinated by
Hmm.
executive presence. I'm really fascinated by, I just saw a book the other day in the airport that I want to get, that was entitled, it was about grit.
Okay.
And I think that's really important. I've always felt like our organization, which is small, comparison to maybe some larger ones, but we definitely punch above our weight. And I think
Mm,
it's because we're gritty. We
period.
know how to roll our sleeves up. So I think there's always a continuous learning piece. For some people, it might be reading the Harvard Business Review. For some people, it may be reading the Wharton School of Business magazine. I think you have to find it wherever you can. But I just try to always pick up something or listen to a podcast where, it may be something outside the scope of what I'm doing, but something that I
Hmm.
really want to learn a little bit more about, because there's so many trends in this world, and I want to be ahead of that instead of finding out about it for the very first time.
Period. And I'll add really quick. That's part of the reason why I started doing interviews as well, because when I got out of college, everyone was like, "Well, ask someone to go to lunch and then pick their brain." And like, who wants to go to lunch with someone they don't know?
That's
You
it. That's
know,
it, right?
nobody
That's
wants
it.
to do
Yeah,
that.
that's
But
it.
if I say if I'm interested in an industry and I say, "Hey, can I interview you?" Or if I'm interested in learning about something or
Yeah,
something like that, and I say, "Can I interview you for my podcast?" I've got a
right.
lot more yeses than "Can I go to lunch with you?" And they're like, no, I don't
There you
know who you
go. There you
are."
go. It's so
So,
funny you said that. I was in Atlanta, and a really good friend who works in another organization had been with the Uber driver twice in one day.
oh
Never, that's
wow.
never happened to me, especially in a big city like Atlanta. But she said that the driver gave her this incredible quote, because he had mentioned something that she had said earlier that day. And she said, "Do you remember what I told you this morning?" He goes, "Did I remember?" He said to her, "I listen like a predator."
Oh
He
wow.
said, I was like, preach, preach. Yeah. He said he listens like a predator. So I think that's vitally
Wow.
important in this world, active listening, and not just hearing people, but listening to what they have to say. So I look, I love the venue. I love the fact that you don't have to go sit across from somebody and break bread and still be able to get the nuggets of knowledge from people. I think that's a great way to go about doing things. I do.
Thank you. And I tell my students, especially the older ones, like the things like I told the kids, you got two ears for a reason, you got two eyes for a reason, you got two nostrils, but you only got one mouth. So you listen as much, you listen twice as much, you observe twice as much, and then I tell them like you smell, I equate that to instinct. Like you sniff
Hmm.
around to see what's happening here, who's
Hmm.
who, what am I doing? And then
Hmm.
after you process that, then you respond. And then that
Hmm.
ties into, like you mentioned, emotional intelligence, not always
Hmm.
reacting, but instead responding, because then you're not as controllable.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Also, yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit more about your business, like what it is that you do? Because um, from uh, from someone who, let's say, like an elementary level, who
Yeah.
never heard of this before.
Right. And so I'll talk about just one of my two jobs. I won't, I mean, again, definitely proud and honored to work for the National Cooperative Bank, where I do chief policy officer there. I do a lot of the government relations work, help out with community development finance and a few other things. But for the sake of this podcast, I'll stick primarily to Rochdale Capital. And so Rochdale it's what's called a community development financial institution, or CDFI. CDFIs have been around since 1994, where they were created in Congress, really as alternatives to banks, right?
Mhm.
Meaning that if someone couldn't go to a traditional bank and get financing, maybe they could go to a community development bank. Number one. Number two, they also were focused on the majority of their work being in uh, low wealth communities,
Mm.
low moderate income. There's so many different tags now that are said about these communities. Communities like I grew up in,
Yep.
and whatnot. But really, they came to head during COVID, and really they got the mantra of financial first responders, right?
Mm.
Because many people who couldn't go to a bank and get a loan to help their small business, or somewhere else, they would go to these CDFIs, many which are banks and credit unions and nonprofits like we are, to be able to get financing. And so for us, we believe in three things. We believe in the promotion of cooperative and community ownership, and that is many different versions. We also believe in the advancement of asset building, wealth creation, things like that. And then last but not least, equitable access to capital. One of the things that I did not realize when I started Rochdale in 2021 was the amount of trauma tied to financial services in some of
Mm.
our communities there
Mm.
is. And so we try to the best of our ability to meet our borrowers where they are, because, and again, the trauma is real for folks that have had some experiences in the financial services world. And so,
Mm.
we do affordable housing, we do affordable cooperative housing. We've done the first,
Mm.
in partnership with others, the first food co-op on indigenous land in New Mexico.
That's
We've
amazing.
got an amazing microloan program for small businesses. One of our favorite loans, and it's paid off now, was a Native Hawaiian food truck. We've done
Wow.
we just did a program for organization that helps returning citizens who were formerly incarcerated, and to help keep them from going back in
Mm.
recidivism. And so, we're not talking about multi-millions of dollars here. We're talking 500,000 or below, 250 or below, 50,000 or below. I think people put these large price tags on things, and don't really realize that to be successful, sometimes entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and community-based organizations don't need millions
Mm.
of dollars. They just need someone to believe in them, to
Wow.
provide them with a little bit of capital to kind of put them over the hump. And so that's one of the things that we take a great deal in pride in doing. So, we are definitely proud to be a part of the CDFI movement with the other 12 to 1,300 CDFIs across the country.
Wow, that was so inspiring. Even as a solopreneur myself, I was just like, wow, when we put it the way, like, you don't need millions, and what
No.
I've been able to create, and I'm sure that you've seen with on a bootstrap, it's like you're right. You can do the things, and you can achieve the things, and it's a different pathway forward, but you can do things. And something that I also like to think about is the ripple effect. And so, like, you as an entity, as a person, as a business, as an entity in general, you'll never fully know the full ripple effect of what you're doing by helping keep people out of incarceration, helping
Hmm.
keep them out of that system, and helping these businesses, and helping these all these
Hmm.
different people. That's like a drop, and you see like the maybe the first couple layers, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see that because you know that incarcerated person that impacts their family, but that impacts generations
Mm-hmm.
after. And
It
then
does.
that the farm and the food truck, it ripples and ripples. So
Mm-hmm.
it might they might not be getting $1 million today, but there's millions of lives even that you're impacting generations from now that will their lives have been changed already based on what you've done. So, how does that feel to someone who grew up the way you did and now to be able to have a ripple effect to the point where you will never, literally, you'll never know how many lives
Yeah.
are changed because of what you've already done and what you continue to do? How does that feel?
I mean, I think the key word, and I talk about it often, is that, is that gratification, and
Mm,
I think it goes back to me during my time with the National Head Start Association. Um, and one of the things that I got a chance to do was to travel to 42 states in 3 years
oh,
doing these
wow.
highly tailored grassroots advocacy trainings about
Mm,
teaching Head Start parents and staff and leadership on how to advocate on behalf of the program. And so I always think about this one individual from Montana. And I went to Montana, did this grassroots advocacy training. And this is in the course of 3 years now. She went from being not a volunteer, but being on the parent policy council for the Head Start. And now all this happened after she wrote her senators, right? And her
oh,
senators
okay.
wrote her back. And it just gave her such a confidence boost. She went on
Mm,
from there to go get a position at on the board of the Montana Head Start Association. And then I think by the time I left the organization, she had made it all the way to the national board of the National Head Start Association.
oh,
And she
wow.
said to me, she said, John, it was that training that you gave and me writing that letter to my
Mm,
elected officials who wrote me back that made me realize that I had a voice.
mm,
And that was just overwhelmingly gratifying for me. And so I think when I left there and I was doing the government relations work really for 13, 14 years, I really lost that gratification because
mm,
I was only dealing with congressional staff. I was only dealing with members of Congress. And, I would get two bills introduced in a year that I know we're never going to pass Congress. And
mm,
so when I would go out on site visits with some of the loan officers and I would get a chance to meet the people, the borrowers, the folks that the community that was getting served, I started to feel that gratification again. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to raise my business acumen
mm,
and not be a lobbyist for the rest of my life. And I just, I wasn't able to make that happen at my previous organization. And then I left there in 2014. And then that's when I came over to the National Cooperative Bank and got a chance to really learn more about the business aspect of
mm,
the side of things and profit and loss and business development and cultivating these relationships and all this kind of thing, but also being able to see the end result of a project that you worked on and going to
mm.
so many. I did a deal at the bank where we did a grocery store on the south shore of Chicago, right? Not far from where
Oh,
the new Obama Center is right now. But this place,
mm,
this neighborhood hadn't had a grocery store in 8 years. And to
wow.
be there on opening day and to see all those people
Mm,
waiting in line and everything else. But on the flip side of that, also talking to 10 to 12 older Americans who were in the neighborhood who were concerned that because of the grocery store and some of the folks being priced out of their own communities and things like that, who were
mm,
fearful of gentrification and who were
mm,
fearful of losing their communities and whatnot. And a great story just to tie a bow on this is that during the tragic murder of George Floyd,
mm.
everyone in that community ran to that grocery store, all different genders, races, you name it, and they all locked hands around that
Wow.
grocery store because they did not want that grocery store to be destroyed
Wow.
because of the level of unrest. And if
Hmm.
that doesn't tell you what that grocery store meant to them,
Yeah.
nothing ever will. And so
Wow.
all of those things just give me a tremendous amount
Mm,
of gratification in what we do on a daily basis. I mean, let me be clear. It's not easy. It's not easy to do the kind of deals that we do. You got to be creative. You got to be innovative.
mm,
Got to find ways to mitigate the risk as much as possible. But when you get it right, and we can't do every loan, but when you get
mm,
it right and you're able to close that loan and you're able to see the fruits of that labor from our lending and business development team, oh,
mm.
the one word is just gratification. It is.
Wow. That was a beautiful, beautiful story. I got chills when you said the
Oh,
hand holding.
thank you.
And it's also because this is the way the universe works. My student yesterday, she's learning about like the history of, she wants to be able to spit back in case somebody tries her in a different way. So
Yeah.
I've been showing her and like sending her articles and having her answer questions about like how we are still in certain situations. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about food deserts literally
Mm-hmm.
yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about how in her neighborhood there's fast food restaurants, but go down the block and there's salad places. And
Mm-hmm.
then I
Mm-hmm.
introduced her to food deserts, and she's a researcher. So while we're on the call, she
Mm-hmm.
starts talking about, oh, I just found out about food swamps. And I had never heard about a food swamp
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before. I knew about food deserts.
Yeah.
So and we were talking about how that's such a problem. So now the next day to be talking to someone who's helping solve that solution is just
Mm-hmm.
like you never know how
You,
things are
you
going to
really
tie
you
together.
really don't. You really don't. And listen, I care deeply about, people call it, deserts, swamps, food security, insecurity, and things like that. I mean, it's important. And again,
Hmm.
access to healthy foods, you're going to start to hear more about the social determinants of health and all this kind of stuff. And nobody's zip code should determine their social economic future. But what I love about your student is, one of the things that my dad always preached to me was that anytime you go into a debate, son, and it's what she's doing, you got to have your facts and stats. And so
Hmm.
I'm a facts and stats nerd where I just really feel like it's important for me to have any kind of conversation with folks to try to prove my point is by telling them
Hmm.
these facts and stats. And so again, I love that intellectual curiosity. I love approaching those things with a beginner's mind because again, like you said, the way the universe is right now, there are a lot of things going on, and we need to
Yeah.
better ourselves through educating ourselves about the issues that we're
Hmm.
facing before we can start to make a positive change about it in some of these communities. And so again, the three pillars for us are obviously financial capital. We need money because we're a nonprofit. We are constantly raising money for us to be able to lend. The relationship capital piece for us is just as important.
Mm.
So, what we're doing now, people who may hear this, like I always tell people, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I do have a drawer full of knives. And then last
Mm.
but not least, the thought leadership. I just think that it's important for, people to put new ideas out here. Everybody doesn't have to like them, but at least
Mm.
to be able to put some ideas out here about some things filled with facts and stats that can help some of the communities that we serve, I think are vitally important. So that's why those four pillars for us as an
Mm.
organization are so important. So
Wow. And I'm going to give you an early signature round of applause just for great conversation. I got to go around three times.
thank you so much.
No,
Thank
of
you. Thank you.
course. We are coming up at the tail end. I could listen to you all day, honestly,
Very
but
kind. Very
um,
kind.
is there anything before I switch it up? Is there anything that you wanted to highlight or talk about that you haven't yet had the opportunity to share?
No, I think I've covered a lot of it. I'll just say this, just as a term. I just feel like there are a lot of things that are going on in the world right now, and we all know what they are. But I really
Mm,
do feel like more than anything, for us to be successful in our advocacy, that first and foremost that democracy is not a spectator sport, so you can't sit on the
mm,
side. And then number two, I think that the only way we're going to fix some of the problems that we're facing is through collective action. And that's with all of us together in the same boat,
yeah.
rowing together. So,
I would definitely, definitely agree with that for shizzle. Anyway, so the next part of this conversation, I want to switch it up. If there's any people you want to thank for along your journey, any shout outs you want to give, and then if you have any questions for me as well, you can do both of those things, one or the other. You're now in control of the interview for the
I
next
oh
few
I
minutes.
appreciate that. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank I got to go back to my parents. I lost my dad 16 years ago and lost my
Oh,
mom 3 years
sorry.
ago, but I am truly my parents' children, my child. I'm sorry. I was thinking about my sister. I think my sister as well. She's been a big supporter of mine, my niece and my brother
Oh,
and whatnot. Family is very important to me. I don't have huge amounts of family on both sides, and so they're very important to me. But also to, I still consider myself to be a late bloomer. I was not the best college student in the world, and I tried to make up for it in grad school. But I do kind of walk into every room that I'm in with a chip on my shoulder, just because I feel like I have something to prove. I always feel like everything that I have was not given, that I have had to earn it, and so that's kind of a motivation for me. I like to also thank, my the National Cooperative Bank and their former CEO, who's no longer with us, but who really saw something in me and believed in
mm,
me. And that was an amazing thing to happen. And he wanted me behind the podium and not out in the crowd. And here I am.
mm.
And so, with that, and then also to the current CEO, who I have a great relationship with and is very supportive of Rochdale, my board. And then lastly, the team that I get an opportunity to work with on a daily basis. I could not ask for a greater group of people, and whatnot. And then last but not least, just the knife, the drawer full of knives that I have, or
Mm.
the support system and all the people that I know, that help me be the best part of me, who challenge me when I need to be challenged, and who also um, push me, because
Mm.
I'm imperfect just like anybody else, and so I appreciate them very much. So that's who I definitely would give some shout outs to if I was to give anybody some love for sure.
Absolutely. And did you have any questions for me as well?
I do, and so
All right.
I've got this DEI background, and I can't, sometimes you can't say it in some circles, but around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And one of the things that I've always been fascinated with is generations. I mean, I'm a proud Gen Xer. You have millennials. I'm raising a Zoomer. Pray for me, please. I'm raising a Zoomer. But as someone who works with children on a daily basis, maybe Zoomers, Alpha, Generation Alpha, are there are there things that you're seeing in them that should give all of us hope for the future? I've already heard about one amazing student and her intellectual curiosity around food deserts and swamps. But I think so many of us don't hear these stories unless
Mm.
it's some survey that some organization puts out every year. But what are some things that you can tell us that give you hope, that should give us hope about the future of these generations coming behind us?
Yeah, actually, I've never been asked that question before, so I'm excited to answer, to be honest. And they're so capable, because they have so much access to all these different technologies that didn't even exist. Like, still remember watching Harry Potter as a child and seeing the pictures move and thinking that that was the coolest thing ever. But now we're calling and like the pictures talking to them, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. And now we have FaceTime. And you literally are having something that was a magical thing in Harry Potter, and now it actually exists in our day to day life.
Mhm.
So they have access to so much. And to some level, I'm upset that they have access to so many things, but it also helps them build a level of understanding and a level of inclusion that they would not be able to have, I think, without having access. They have so much compassion. I have some students who are neurodivergent in my gaming clubs because everything I do is virtual. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're so patient. Like, I'm a little bit nervous sometimes when a new personality enters because kids can be cruel in
They
different
can.
spaces. And
Yeah.
so I have had like every once in a blue moon, like really it's so not common where I have to like enough, just remind them what time it is. But typically they're so patient, so loving, so welcoming. And so even the ones who are a little bit more spicy, when there's a child that joins that is clearly
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent for whatever the case may be, those feisty ones are the most loving and most
Mm-hmm.
patient and like, do you need help? I can show you where this outfit is, or I can show you how to get this particular piece of the game. And
Mm-hmm.
then for the older ones, a lot of times teenagers have a bad rep because they're developing, they're growing, they're testing things out, but
Mm-hmm.
teenagers are just big kids. They're just
Mm-hmm.
kids in bigger bodies, more
Mm-hmm.
emotions, strange things happening to them as well. They don't understand things. They're also learning to see their parents as humans, because when you're a
Mm-hmm.
child, you see your parent as a superhero. And then
Mm-hmm.
once you start to develop your own cognitive awareness, you start to see
Mm-hmm.
the flaws too. And so they're processing the flaws and the great things. And it's confusing. It's a confusing state.
Mm-hmm.
But all young people, and I believe all people, period, just want to be seen, safe, and heard. And that's what they just need in this
Mm-hmm.
life. And so the older ones too, they're so inquisitive. They want to know, like, well, what happens if you do this? And I want to learn this. And they all just want a place really to feel accepted. And once you can provide that acceptance for them, that's
Right.
when the creativity comes out. They're so creative. They're such visionaries. And a lot of the times, the ideas that I have come from the kids. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make a movie. One of my students, who's like 8 or 9, I can't really remember,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, a movie, Coach Yana, you need to make a series. So I was like, a series? And it needs to have 100 episodes. I was like, 100 episodes. And before I realized how much work an animated series was, I
Yeah.
agreed to it. And so, but we're 10 episodes in, and
Nice.
yeah, that's why when you were talking about like visionary stuff, I believe a little bit earlier, like my sister is a painter, so I got her to paint this Amazon box, and then
Mm-hmm.
I cut characters out and we did it in Canva because I don't know how to animate. I don't know how to do those things, but I
Mm-hmm.
know how to figure it out. And I
Yeah.
figured it out. And so then from there, started making books to go along with the series and books to go along with different things, because literacy is a challenge right now. But
Yeah, it is.
yeah, unfortunately. But to answer that question, I think that, and I was having this conversation a little bit earlier today too. We don't hear about the planes that land, but more planes land than crash. But we do
Mm-hmm.
hear when a plane crashes, and then suddenly people are afraid to fly. But planes
Mm-hmm.
land significantly more.
All the time.
Yes,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So I would say there is a lot of hope for these children, but these children are also, they're highly intuitive. So they're going to catch on to stuff because they're exposed to stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a high standard for your kid, you better be making sure that you're attaining that same high standard in your own
Mm-hmm.
life, because they're
That's
going to
right.
call you out on it. They're going to
They
see
are.
it. They're going to,
Mm-hmm.
and because people are more open with how feelings are, they may be processing feelings and feeling things that you may not have had to deal with as a child, because they're
Right.
seeing what's happening all over the world because they have a device. So just being there, being a listening ear to them, asking them about their world, asking to play the games with them, even if you don't understand it. I'll be
Right.
honest, I don't really know how to play Minecraft that well. And they laugh
Neither
at me
do I.
because I don't know. Yeah,
Neither do
it's
I.
very confusing, but
Yeah.
I'll play it and I admit to them and I ask them. That's an easy way also to develop leadership in your child. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well,
Mm-hmm.
how do you do this thing? And they'll, oh, Coach Johnny, you don't know how to do this. Let me show you. And then
Mm-hmm.
in Roblox, I'll say, I don't know how to, like, there's this new game, 99 Nights in the Forest. I thought the whole point of the game was to keep the campfire going. And so I was like, this is a boring game, guys. So I finally played with my siblings who are in college. And then they were like, oh no, you gotta build this and do this. And so now I got to tell my younger students, guess what?
Yeah.
I played 99 Nights. And they're like, oh my gosh, finally. And so then they can teach me how to do stuff. So all that to say, they're very sweet. They're very
Right.
sensitive. They're feeling all the things. But if you take it as an approach of, okay, who is this child? Not necessarily who do I think this child should be. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the parents that I work with on the children that I work with one on one, Their parents
Mm-hmm.
are type A and they're type
Mm-hmm.
B. And so they're
Yeah.
like, when I was your age, I was doing this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
But so I can help those young people, whether they're about to go to college, in college, or learning how to read, honestly, help them grow into themselves. And then also remind the go-getters, like, everybody can't be a go-getter, because who's going to cook the food when it's prepared? If we're
That's it.
always out hunting, when are we going to eat? And so all that to say, I tend to be long-winded, but I got a lot of
No,
stuff to
no, that was
share.
great. That was great. You look, you've given me
Yeah.
hope, and I think out of everything you said, which was all great, my favorite part of that was when in the very beginning when you said they are capable. That's it,
Yes,
and I think what people don't realize is that not all children are cookie cutter. Not all
exactly.
children are cookie cutter and everything else. Everybody's different. And so, I often see a lot of young athletes or young students, and I ask myself, I hope the child wants that, or is that the parents who want that and whatnot? I mean, in full transparency, there was a part of my life where I had to take a step back and go, oh, this is what my dad wants. This is not what
Mm,
I want. And I had to switch it up. And he wasn't very happy about it. But what I had to get him to understand was that I had to live my life. I
yes.
could not live the life that you wanted to
Yeah.
live because of the choices that you made. And then that's when it all opened up for me. And
Hmm.
yeah, I have a 19-year-old son, and I just try to just protect, prepare,
Hmm.
and provide, and that's it. And he's got to see the world for himself and make his own choices. And I'm here if you need me.
Hmm.
I'm here to bounce things off of. But I don't want to be a helicopter parent. I don't. That's not my thing. I don't want to fly. I want you to be able to
Yeah.
make your own choices, stand by the decisions you make, and then learn from the ones that were not necessarily a good choice. So I'm going to take everything you said, and it's going to give me hope. And I love the word capable. And you helped me from a generational standpoint, being someone who's fascinated with all that stuff. I really appreciate you giving me that rundown. Really do.
Absolutely. And thank you for the question. Did you have any other questions before I take back over?
No, I think that was it. I mean, when you start talking about the children, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. Not even knowing that I would get an opportunity to ask the question, but when you gave me that softball, I wanted to make sure that I hit it out the park for sure.
Well, home run. Alrighty. So we are about done, but I do have three cliche questions that I
Okay,
ask everybody at the
okay,
end.
okay.
The first one is, if you can think back to a time when you were younger and in a darker space, what's one piece of advice that you know now that you really wished you would have known back then?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think when I was in uh, asking for help, that was
Mm,
one of the things. And that's probably why I wasn't the best college student that I could have been, because I was so proud and didn't want to ask for help. And
mm,
again, like I said to you before, taking that experience from undergrad and going to grad school, I was the first one at accounting tutoring. I was the last one to leave, right? And
mm.
so I gotten past the proud part, and realized that I can ask for help, and I do that a lot more now. I try to a lot more now in my adult life, although I do find it hard sometimes to still
Fair.
ask for help, because I do consider myself to be a resourceful person. Um, but yeah, that would probably be one thing. It's a great question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well
I'm
said. And
afraid of
it's
the second and the third now. Oh my goodness.
oh, no,
Good.
no, no. That
Good,
it's a
good. I
little
know.
lighter.
Good, good,
The
good.
second question, although we can go there, but I already have
No,
these
no, I
prepared.
know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know.
Okay, so the second question is, the universe and the internet are very similar and they work in very mysterious ways. So we have no way of knowing who will listen to this interview at some point. Is there any person, organization, group, company, whatever, that if they were to listen to this, that you would really like to work with in some capacity?
I mean, I think for me, um, I first and foremost, I'm really big on building the bench. Um, and I feel, I heard this great quote not too long ago. I'm getting to this place in my career where I want to plant seeds to trees of which shade I won't stand under, right? And so
Mm,
I think it's important that any emerging leader, any person who wants to do something like I'm doing, or not in this world, to have heard some of the things that I talked about today, because I feel like it's some of first of all, it's vitally important, and number two, especially for leaders of color, it's important that they understand the construct and the hierarchy of human value, which is so
mm,
vitally important. So that would probably be the bench. Would probably be the folks that I would want to listen to this and have an understanding about my journey, and in hopes that it'll
mm.
help them in their journey.
Yeah, well, it already helped me, so I know it'll help some other people. It already inspired me. So check at least for one person on the bench, and
Thank
then
you. I
whoever
appreciate
else
it.
comes,
I only got
we'll
to
make
reach
sure.
one. I only got to reach one. Okay.
Well, alrighty. And then the last question is if someone wants to contact you or support your mission,
Mhm.
what's the best way to do that? And then if someone wants to just stay up to date, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I would say the best way, rochdalecapital.org. It's a great way to do it through the contact us. Obviously I'm on LinkedIn, John Holdsclaw IV. There's a great way to do it as well. I think that you know, that's usually how most people do it. They reach out on LinkedIn, or they go to our website and contact us. And then, I mean, with the internet now, you can find anybody's email address or whatever. But that would probably be the best way to do it moving forward. Always happy to hear from folks. I will say, you get on some of these social media platforms and everybody's trying to pitch you something. I get that and I
Yeah.
understand it. And you have to kind of wade through some of that stuff to get to the folks. I am really proud to say that a lot of Rochdale's prospective borrowers come from them visiting our website, sending us a
Mm,
contact us, those kind of things. We don't market heavily because we don't necessarily have the budget to do so, but it almost feels better when you get things word of mouth, or when people go to
mhm.
your website and they like the message that you are portraying, and then they fill out one of the contact us forms. So that would probably be the best way to do it.
Absolutely. And then in closing, I'm like a coach. Like I always, it's in and then it is one more thing. So
Go ahead, go
can
for it.
you can you give us or leave us off with one piece of knowledge or wisdom to finish us off for the rest of the week?
So I'll say this. My mom was someone who was very important to me, and I wear a band on my arm that says
Oh.
hustle. And I'll give you two of her favorite things. She tell me as a child, you have to hustle, because nobody's going to give you anything in this world.
Hmm.
And then she'd almost say, and you said this a little earlier, and I thought about it. A closed mouth doesn't get fed. You got the two ears, the two nostrils, the two eyes, and you
Hmm.
got the one mouth. But there does come a time in your life where a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So you do have to speak up sometimes for things that you believe in, you want,
Hmm.
you need, that kind of thing. And so that would be the two things that I would say, just because they resonated so much with me as a child, and my parents are still teaching me on a daily basis.
Mm.
But those are two, the facts and stats from my old man, and then the closed mouth doesn't get fed, and the hustle part of that, are three things that I really embody so much of what I am as a person and how I
Mm.
try to live my life. So
Absolutely. Well, it was a blast and a half to listen to you, learn from you. There's so many gems that you shared,
oh,
so
thank
many
you.
stories of, well, thank you as well. So,
Yeah.
that you shared. I'm going to give you another signature round of applause.
I appreciate it, Coach. I do. I do. I
Yes,
do.
well, I appreciate it as well. And I know that the listeners will. I'll be sure to put whatever links you share in the description as well, just to help with whatever and where, yeah, in whatever way that I can. But this was
Mm.
a truly, truly wonderful conversation. And I'm just so grateful that we were able to connect, so grateful we were able to do this. I know that the listeners got a lot out of it, and I know I sure did. And again, there's the ripple effect. So now things that I learned from you, I'll ripple onto my students, and then they'll ripple onto who
Oh,
knows however many. So thank you so
likewise.
much.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for the inclusion, and cannot wait to listen to future episodes with upcoming guests.
Alrighty, thank you. And everyone listening, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. This is another terrific episode of Healed and Chill, and you'll healed and chilled, and you'll hear from me again next week. Bye.